Hey, it's Nico Daglio here with part 1 of 2, breaking down my track Rings from my recent EP, Counterpart, which is out everywhere on Schematic Music Company. This was live streamed on Twitch and then edited down for YouTube. There will be a part 2 shortly, but let's get into it. Here's the song.
Party last night wasn't quite what I expected. No one really came. Well, all our friends were there, but no one mentioned your name. And I forgot to write you that letter like I said I would. I don't have that much to say. I guess I should be grateful that I'm not feeling sad, though I'm not feeling much at all. But yeah, I could be better, or I could be so much worse. Not sure where I stand. I left my window open on the first night it got cold, so I made some new friends with the birds on the rooftop. They taught me that the winds blow and the seasons end. No one mentioned your name. Yeah, I guess I'm grateful that I'm not feeling so sad, though I'm not feeling much at all. Sure, it could be better, or it could be so much worse. Not sure where I stand.
Stylistically, it's like a kind of interesting blend of drum and bass and trap. It originally started very trappy, and then I kind of got the idea for the break stuff at the end, and then I went back and kind of redid a bunch of the middle stuff to make it a little more drum and bassy. Yeah, okay, so what is this for? What am I showing you? I'm showing you some techniques to make certain sounds and things. I'm gonna show you like a little bit of conceptual stuff of why the techniques work, exclamation point. What I'm not gonna show you is how I wrote the song, like in terms of composition and like recording and stuff like that. And I'm also not going to say, like, I'm not going to talk about why you would use certain techniques. So I'm going to talk about the how and the what, but I'm not really going to talk about the why, because I think that's something I feel like people should figure out kind of on their own in terms of how they develop their own musical taste. Yeah, so I just wanted to put that there. Anyways, so I have a couple things I want to talk about, and I will start with the 808.
Party last night wasn't quite what I expected. No one really came. Well, all our friends were there, but no one mentioned your...
Okay, cool. So this is what the bass sounds like on its own. This is a Heisenberg, it's like phase modulation, which is kind of like frequency modulation, but it's generally harsher and more digital, also less predictable. This is not doing too much super complicated sound design stuff here. Pretty much just a sine wave and the octave, a little bit of noise, and there's a pitch envelope, which is very short and coming from above just to make it kind of more drum-like. There's a little bit of an amplitude envelope. Oh, also there's a tiny bit of stereo width just to make it kind of fill your head a little bit. But what I wanted to talk about is at the chorus here. Do you guys notice anything? It's not just a bass line. It's got some extra little juice going on. Pretty much this like second synthesizer, it's a cleaner tone a little bit. It's a little more FM-y. Right, so this is hidden inside of the 808, both because it's quieter and also because I have this compressor, which is really acting as a distortion. If you make the attack and release of a compressor like really short, it operates not on the average of the volume of the input, but on the actual waveform itself. So here I have the 808 chords, I'm calling them, going into this compressor, and then the side chain of the compressor is the 808 that doesn't have any chords. So when you combine those, you get the 808, the one with all the beef, is distorting the chords. When you do add back in the low main 808, they're like glued together a little bit. And then I exaggerate that by having an actual distortion that distorts them together, which I automate the mix so that I think only comes in later. Yeah, and so the reason why that works is because these chords that I'm using are mostly just tenths, which is just a third and an octave, and fifths, and sometimes like a seventh. They're very hollow chords. If there's a tenth, a major tenth, that is the fifth harmonic of the fundamental. So when they're distorted together, there's not very much like inharmonicity of the two different notes. The frequencies are like multiples of each other. Typically there's thought to be like a separation of different approaches towards making sound. You know, composition is supposed to deal with like melody and harmony, whereas sound design deals primarily with timbre. Sonority is kind of this gray space in between harmony and timbre, as I see it. I think of sonority as like, you know, the abstract version of like a key. It's like what sounds are acceptable, what sounds fit within this greater sound of the piece or that area of the piece. How this relates to the 808 and the chords is that I think that the idea that things should be separated is kind of silly. I think everyone is a composer and everyone is a sound designer, and all of these things are more useful when they're thought just to be different ways of approaching sound. Yeah, so basically what I'm going for is that composition informs sound design informs composition. So because I'm using these really open chords, I can fit them within the 808 using certain sound design techniques like this, like sidechained distortion, you know, saturating them together, things like that. And that's more appropriate because I've thought about what element of the composition works with that element of the sound design. Anyways, yeah, that's that. I have two different aux sends with this kind of weird thing going on. There's a splitter, there's an inverter, a compressor, a merger. It's this really useful way to get sidechained compression, but it's more exact. It's kind of more of a the way it works, I can control how much any particular element is sidechained. So this one is getting sidechained from, I think, the kick and the snare. This one is getting it from the bass. And you'll notice the attack, release, and sensing is very, very short. So this compressor is pretty much acting as a distortion where the bass is distorting whatever I put through it. It's a very different sound than the typical sidechain compression where like the bass drum hits and everything else cuts out for a second. This is more of like you still hear everything else, but it's a little bit colored by the bass. Okay, so interesting thing. If we solo just this send, this is what it sounds like. Which is wild. I mean, you're expecting that you would hear anything you're putting through get quieter whenever the drums hit, but it seems like we're only hearing it when the drums hit. So you'd think that mixing it back in would make things louder because you have the dry signal going through, and then you also have this added signal. But this is what's happening. We have an aux send, and we can control how much each element is going into the aux send. That is split. On one side, we apply the effects, which in this case is a compressor. On the other side, we invert the signal. And when we merge it, the inverted signal cancels out any of the dry signal left in the processed signal. If you think about this, if there was no effects, we'd have an inverted signal and then a positive signal. And that would just cancel out. We'd get nothing. And we can do that just by muting this compressor. It's silent. Nothing's going to come through. It's like +1, -1. It's just 0. When you do have the compressor on, it's dipping the positive phase. The inverted signal is the thing that gets through when this compressor is activated by the drums. So what we're hearing when we hear this aux send, it's inverted. So when you add back in the dry signal, the inverted phasing dips the volume of those elements. So here it's getting compressed by the drums. If I turn this down, it's no longer getting compressed by the drums. The reason why I might want to do this instead of a normal send is because you can control how much this sidechain compression affects each channel individually, and you're only using one compressor. So instead of copying this compressor to every single channel and changing the ratio for each, you can just have one compressor, control how much it affects each of the channels. It is possible to do in other DAWs. I think in other DAWs it's not as easy as it is in Audio Tool, because Audio Tool has this kind of like modular setup. I have figured out some ways to do it in Reaper, but it takes a lot more just like kind of messing around and tweaking with settings and figuring things out. There's a lot of things that you should do with grouping, like making elements glue together, that is not really super easy with this technique, but this technique is great for like sidechaining stuff. I'm going to show you what the elements that are being distorted by the bass sound like. So right now we're hearing only the effect of the compressor, so we're not hearing any of the dry signal. It's got this like sound, and what that is pretty much amplitude modulation or distortion from the bass. And when that's mixed back in here. So that's what it sounds like to an extreme. We have the bass drum pumping it, and we also have the bass distorting it and adding this color. Without the coloring, with the coloring. So what this does in the mix generally is it kind of lets the bass feel like it's clipping things out, but not actually clip things out. It's fun to have that feeling of like, wow, this is exploding. This mix is so loud and it's clipping them. But we're not actually clipping the master. We have tons of headroom. You know, you can get that feeling of something being really loud without it actually being really loud. Oh my God, hello. How's it going? Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you got something out of this breakdown. There will be more coming. I'll be finishing up this song, including talking about some fun things like a homemade vocoder. There's a vocoder that I made. Some cool chord gating techniques. Interesting thing here, the processing on the chords is being controlled by the drums. And then we listen to just the chords, right? And and lots of other fun stuff. Let me know if you have any comments or questions or suggestions for future videos. I want to do more both on Twitch and on YouTube, and long form kind of educational, technical YouTube videos. My music is available on Spotify and all other streaming services, as well as on Bandcamp, and I have some physical media as well, although the tapes for this EP are all sold out. If you like this kind of stuff, you can follow me here or on Instagram. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.